I have a business marketing degree, and yet I'm working two retail jobs. One pays $10 an hour, the other pays 25, but barely gives me any shifts. Even with both, I'm not making enough to get by. Some days I struggle to afford food. I live with a roommate, work full-time, and still have to choose between pulling money from savings, skipping meals, or just drinking water to get through the day. This isn't a rare story. This is Generation Z. And the scary part is, this isn't how adulthood was supposed to feel. A common response to stories like this is simple. Every generation struggles. Gen Z just needs to work harder. And sure, that's partially true, but the numbers don't lie. When I first moved out, I paid $280 a week in rent. Now, that same place costs $450 a week. I earn over 3 times the federal minimum wage, and I still can't afford to live where I work. So the question becomes, where does this go in 5 years? Over 100 million Americans are locked out of home ownership. Rents are climbing hundreds of dollars every single year. 6 in 10 Gen Zers say they can't save for the future. Only 15% believe they'll afford a home in the next 5 years. That's not laziness, that's math. Let's talk about what's actually happened to your money. Over the last decade alone, inflation has eaten away roughly 36% of the dollar's value. What does that mean in real terms? That $100 you had in 2015, you'd need $136 today to buy the same stuff, and your dollar now only buys 73% of what it used to. And wages? They didn't keep up. Here's a moment that hits different. 2 basic burgers at a fast food joint, $8.40. That simple transaction proves something we all feel but don't always say out loud. Nothing is cheap anymore, except labor. When governments faced economic crises, they responded by printing money. Assets skyrocketed, but wages didn't. And for Gen Z, entering the workforce during the highest inflation in 40 years, that damage is permanent. And even when inflation slows down, prices don't actually come back down. They just rise less aggressively, and the baseline never resets. But housing, that's where the dream officially dies. Back in 2000, the average rent was around $639 a month. In 2025, it's roughly $1,650. That's nearly triple. Let that sink in. Here's the generational breakdown on how long it takes to buy a house. Boomers needed about 2 to 3 years of income. Gen X, 3 to 4 years. Millennials, 4 to 5. Gen Z, we're looking at 6 to 7 years of full income just to afford a down payment. In Australia, it's even worse. 14 years of income if you saved every single dollar. That's not living, that's survival math. So what's Gen Z doing? They're staying home longer. In the US, young adults living with parents are up 87% in 2 decades. In Australia, 177% since 2016 alone. Tiny homes, prefab houses. There are even stories of students flying to campus because it's cheaper than renting nearby. These aren't lifestyle choices or minimalist trends, they're coping mechanisms. And this is where the culture war really kicks off. Gen Z gets called lazy, entitled, too soft for the real world. Yet nearly 40% of Gen Z has a side hustle. They're not avoiding work, they're avoiding exploitation. Quiet quitting, bare minimum Mondays. Lying flat. Call it what you want, but this isn't rebellion, it's disillusionment. Why grind endlessly when loyalty isn't rewarded? When layoffs happen instantly, without warning? When promotions don't even beat inflation? Gen Z knows companies would replace them tomorrow without hesitation, so they protect their energy today. That doesn't mean they have no work ethic. It means they have a different contract with labor, one based on reality, not promises. Education was supposed to be the way out, right? The ticket to mobility, security, success. Instead, it became a trap. Tuition has risen faster than housing, healthcare, and childcare. Student debt is absolutely crushing. Nearly 40% of recent graduates say they'd rather spend a week in jail than deal with their student loans. Think about that for a second. So Gen Z is adapting. They're going into trades, community colleges, skill-based learning platforms. Degrees are becoming strategic decisions, not aspirational dreams. And yet, Gen Z's debt is rising faster than any other generations. Between 2022 and 2023, Boomers' debt actually went down. Millennials, up 8%. Gen Z, up 15.4%. Now, is this the worst generation has ever had it? Historically speaking, no. The lost generation faced World War I, the Great Depression, and World War II back to back. They didn't have social media, side hustles, or safety nets to fall back on. Perspective matters, but so does reality. Gen Z didn't break the system, they inherited it. So let's cut to the real question. Is Gen Z lazy, or have they simply realized that the effort no longer matches the reward? They're facing higher costs, slower economic mobility, and permanent uncertainty that previous generations didn't experience at this scale. But here's what they also have: time, technology, global access, entrepreneurial instincts that are hardwired into how they operate. Gen Z isn't swimming forward, they're treading water, trying not to drown. And what happens next depends on policy changes, innovation, and whether society chooses to actually support its future or just keep blaming it for being realistic. Because one thing is absolutely certain: you cannot grind your way out of a broken system forever. Eventually, something has to give.